So, hello everyone, welcome to another Hugh Dale photography tutorial. Today I'm going to have a quick, and I mean quick, look into frequency separation. This is my portrait of Amy, and I'm going to go straight into setting up the frequency separation. It does require us to understand at least a little bit about Photoshop, especially how to use layers. This is sort of an advanced technique, but if you follow along closely, you should be fine most of the way. Again, if you have any issues, please just go ahead and ask me in the comments. I will try and reply as soon as I can. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the layer a couple of times, and we're going to do a couple of different effects to set up the frequency separation. But okay, so basically what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to use a Control and J shortcut on the keyboard. So I'm going to click Control and J together, and that's going to duplicate my background layer, and I'm going to do that again so that I've got two layers, and the bottom one I'm going to label as low and the top one I'm going to label as high. We're going to talk about what the difference is between those two layers in just a moment when I've got something visual to show you and to explain. Now for the moment here I'm going to click on the eye that is on the high layer so that we turn that off. Now obviously you're not going to see much difference right now in the screen because they're all the same layer, so when I turn that off apparently nothing happens, but we can know for ourselves that the high layer is now turned off. So the first thing I'm going to do with the low layer is I'm actually going to turn it into a smart object. I'm going to do that by right clicking on the layer, and then I'm going to click Convert to Smart Object. Why am I doing that? Well, basically when a layer is a smart object and you want to apply a filter, which is what we're going to do in just a second, it allows you to go back and change that filter even after it's been applied, which you wouldn't normally be able to do. So this is going to give us a little bit more control over what we're going to do next. And what we are going to do next is we're going to add a Gaussian blur. Gaussian blur? Never quite sure how to say that. Anyway, we're going to add a Gaussian blur, or Gaussian blur. That's, now I see it spelled. There we go. Anyway, what we're looking to do here is obviously we're going to blur the layer. Now this might seem a bit odd at first when we're working on a portrait, we want to keep it sharp, but don't worry, there's a reason for this. So, with the Gaussian blur, we want to make sure that we sort of have blurred it enough to remove the detail from the skin, but we don't want to over blur it. So if you look here, we certainly don't want to go to this. This is no good to us. This is completely blurred. This is unusable. We want to definitely bring that back until we've got some semblance of detail, but the micro detail, the detail on the skin, the pores, that should be gone. Now I think, looking at the preview here, we're mostly alright. I could take it back a little bit. No, I think we're starting to get a bit too much in there. I'm going to leave it there. Now, like I said, I can come back and change this in a moment. Now, let me show you how that works. So I'm going to click OK on the Gaussian blur now, and you'll see beneath now we have a couple of sublayers that say Smart Filters and Gaussian blur. And if I should want to change that now normally if I had applied that filter I wouldn't be able to. I'd have to undo it and go back and add it again. But because I've got a smart object here, I can just double click Gaussian blur, I'm really struggling with that word, and I can change it as I see fit. I think we were pretty close just now. I'm gonna move that back up again. Yeah, about 6.87 is fine. This is going to depend entirely on the image, by the way. I could just say to you, yeah, a radius of 7.6 pixels, but it really does depend on the image, and it may be less or more for you. I am working on an image here that isn't a close-up portrait, it's more of a half-body portrait, which you probably wouldn't always use this technique on, which is why I'm going to do another video that's sort of more in-depth about it, but this one's more about just setting it up and getting you going so you can play with it. Then about the actual technique of frequency separation. But you can see, yeah, basically we're just looking to get rid of the sort of finer details of the skin in that one. So I'm going to click OK. I'm pretty happy with that. Now this brings us off to the high layer. Now the high layer is going to be a sort of high pass layer, but we're not going to use the high pass filter. Instead we're going to go to Image, and we're going to go to Apply Image. Now the settings for this that I'm going to put in here, they are dependent on whether your image is 8-bit or 16-bit. Now today I am working with a 16-bit image, so my settings are going to reflect that. I will try and post the 8-bit settings for Apply Image into the comments section or into the About section below so you know what to do. But you can see immediately my settings are already in place because I've done this recently, so they've stayed to the default, but I'm just going to talk to you about what you need here. First of all, you need the layer set to low. It's going to take its information from the low layer. You want the channel set to RGB, and you want to check Invert. Now, you want your blending to be set to add mode, so if it's set to normal, I'll just show you what happens there. You can see we've got quite a different look to the image. That's no good. We want it set to add. Your scale to 2 and your offset to 0, and leave your opacity at 100%. As I said, several of those do change dependent on whether you have an 8-bit image or a 16-bit image. I'll show you just quickly now how you can check that, but I'm just going to click OK here first. So just to show you so you know how to check for this, you can go up to image, and if you go to mode, you should see here where it says mine is checked on 16 bits. That means I have a 16-bit image. If yours is checked on 8 bits, well, that means you have an 8-bit image, and you should use the preferences that I'm going to post below. Okay, so let's continue. So the final thing to set up, or the last couple of things, we've done the major work now, to set up our frequency separation is we need to set the high layer to linear light. So in the blend modes here, I'm going to linear light. And as you can see, our image comes back to normal. And this is now a blend of the high and low layers. And if I Alt and click on the eye of the background, as you can see, absolutely nothing changed here, which is great. That basically means that we've recreated the image. Now if I turn that off, you should see now that we have a low layer and we have a high layer, and when they're both turned on, they combine to make what is the original photo. If I Alt click here again, so these two are turned off, you can see there's absolutely no difference there. It looks exactly the same. Now, what is really going on here? What are we doing? Well, what we have done is we have separated our image into two frequencies, the high frequency and the low frequency. And when I talk about frequencies, if you don't already know about it, you maybe think I'm talking about audio or some kind of signal, but I kind of am talking about a signal. I'm talking about visual signals. And basically, what we have, when we have a low frequency image, we are talking about the sort of colour and the basic tones of the image, which you can see here. And as you move away, if you were to step back from the screen now, it would still look like the image because you're still seeing basic tonal data. On the other side, we have the high image, which is the texture between things, the textures and the lines that give you the sharp and small details. And when we separate those two things out, we can have a much higher level of control over how we're editing our image. Going through quickly again, I'm going to duplicate my layer twice, and I'm going to call the first low, and I'm going to call the top layer high. I'm going to turn my low layer, by right-clicking it, into a smart object, convert to smart object. That could take a minute. So what we're going to do next, now we've created our low layer, we're going to go to filter, and we're going to add a Gaussian blur. Here we go. And we're going to make sure that we're just losing the main details of the skin, but we're not losing the sort of overall. Sorry, you can't see what I've done there because I left the high on by accident. There we go. We can see the difference there. And there we go. Finally, with the high, we're just going to go to image and apply image, and we're going to input these settings here. If you have a 16-bit image, you're going to input the settings that have been written into the comment section or the about section of the video. If you have an 8-bit image, and I'm going to click OK, and finally you're going to set the blend mode of the high layer to linear light. Now, this is where some of the interesting things happen. So, how do we work on the low layer? Well, what we need to do first, we need to create a new blank layer above it. So notice that, but when I did that just then, sorry, I just deleted that, I clicked on the low layer, and then I clicked on the new layer, because that meant that my new layer would appear above the layer that I had selected. And what we're going to do is we're going to clip this layer to the low layer, so it doesn't affect anything else. So I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to position my mouse in between the two layers. So I'm holding Alt on the keyboard, positioning my mouse directly between the two layers. You can see how the icon of the mouse changes there. I'm just going to click, and you can see that sort of indents there and shows you a little arrow saying that this is basically clipped to that layer below. And this is the layer we're going to work on for the low frequencies. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on her skin. And some of the low frequency problems here are just the more tonal colour problems, and that's going to be things like over here, and let me just change back to my hand tool a second. Over here we have some problems where we've got a few highlights. Down here we have a few highlights. You know, I could go really deep into this, but being they're not best quality image, I'm going to sort of leave it there for the minute. What we're going to do for that though is we're going to grab the old brush tool, and we're going to set our opacity and our flow quite low, because we want to be very, very careful. Now I'm going to show you first what happens when I do this correctly, and I will also show you what happens when I do it wrong, so you can see the effect that this might have. But basically I'm going to keep my thumb on the Alt button, and I'm going to keep sampling areas of the image as to where I'm working. And as you can see, I'm slowly building up now, and I'm using brush strokes, and you can hear my mouse button going. I'm not doing just one click, I'm going over and over again, and I'm constantly resampling here. I'm just bringing colour back into where we've lost it. Now if I turn this layer on and off, you can hopefully see the difference I'm making there. It's subtle and it's slow. I'm working bit at a time, so I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to try and follow the tones and work up on that. Now let me show you what happens if I don't set my opacity and flow low, if I actually leave them on full. Let's see now. There we go. And you can see immediately I'm making really, really strong changes to her skin and to the tone of her skin, especially in this patch here where it's gone really, really awful. And let's see what happens now if I just pick one colour and start colouring in that entire area. You can see that obviously looks way off. And now as we move out, we've lost all colour and definition of the skin. It looks absolutely terrible. So you have got to be subtle. There is a real technique to this. And I'm just going to go back and back and back and remove everything I did there. There we go. We're back to about something a little bit more normal. There we are. So that's the low frequency layer. And you can see there that as I was painting, even when I really messed it up and used high opacity and high flow, the texture remained. We were only focusing on the colour. The texture of the skin was still there, which is absolutely fantastic, because when we use something like the clone tool, or when we use the healing brush or spot healing brush tool, even the patch tool, what can often happen is that we will lose the texture, we'll lose the correct skin texture for that area and replace it with something that really wasn't there. Now, again, in this particular image, it's a bit of a shame that the texture of the skin isn't perfect there anyway, and that's due to the highlight, and we probably would want to change that, but we'd want to change that separately to the colour of the image. Now, there's definitely a few issues here. So you can see we've got some blotches on the skin, we've got something here. Now, I'll go through in another video, you know, being able to highlight these and figure out what you're actually looking for. But again, I'm just going to move on to the high layer now and show you how we can use that. So with the high layer, we're going to use the healing brush tool, and we're going to use this to basically patch over texture from a good part of skin to a bad part of skin. Now here, the texture isn't perfect anyway, but what I really want to deal with is a couple of problems here, and you can see here there's a bit of a bump and a bump here, something going on here. There's a few different things actually we could deal with, but what I'm going to do is use the tool as I normally would, but I just want to make sure that the sampling is set only to the current layer, because we don't want to take anything from below. I'll show you just very quickly what happens if you leave current and below set like that. So I'll sample to the side here and start moving over, and oh my gosh, we've got something really bizarre there. We definitely don't want that. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to change my sampling to current layer so that it's only sampling the high layer, and this time I'm going to do exactly the same thing. And there we go, you can see I'm just smoothing out those bits and bumps here, and I could do something along here. Here we go, we've got a bit of a problem there. Same over here and here. And you can see how I'm just beginning to remove these imperfections bit by bit. Now be sure to use the correct skin texture for the area you are adjusting. You don't want to be taking this sort of texture over here and posting it on there. You can see what's gone wrong immediately there. You want to be taking the skin texture from the area. So working small and being aware of where you're working is very important to working on this. I haven't quite got that one there. I'm not entirely happy with that. I might go back and change that. But you can see how we're working this in here bit by bit. I've got a bit of a line here that I can use the high to get rid of, and as we go there you can see we're removing that, going down and down and down. There we go. So I'm not going to continue much further, but I am just going to scroll out. There is a bit of a problem here as well actually. I'm just going to, let's just while I'm here, may as well deal with. There we go, and one over here, and I'm going to leave it there, otherwise I could be here for ages. There you go, I've already started now. I'm just going through and through and through, and I haven't even set it up properly. But to show you the difference now, let's zoom a bit more on that area so you can see overall. This was before, this is after. You can see how we've already started to really clean up that skin. But that's frequency separation. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments. I hope you find this useful. Please do go and play with it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.